Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cultivating Business. I'm Kevin McLaughlin, partner with Centri Consulting, where I lead our cannabis practice. We have another fantastic guest today. Joining us is the CFO of the Blinc Group, Steve Abraham. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And, I'm going to obviously give you a hard time at some point during this conversation, but have appreciated all of your guys' work and support over the last 9 months.
Absolutely. Always great to chat with you. Looking forward to our conversation today. So let's jump right in. First, I always like to start with a little bit of background. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background, how you got into the space, and how you currently fit into the industry.
Perfect. No, absolutely happy to do that. Always an interesting story, given the industry. Mine actually has a root through ice cream, but happy to jump into it. My background originally, I was a Wall Street guy, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, as an equity analyst, and then worked on the buy side managing money. Sort of, I think of that as the first third of my career. The second third of my career was my corporate America phase. I ran corporate strategy, investor relations, and a few other things for a publicly traded company. While at Reuters, built a new research business for Wall Street. And then the last third of the career really has been sort of small companies and most importantly, cannabis, really for the last 5 or 6 years. And I was sort of kidding, before when I said it goes through ice cream, but in reality is I was an investor in a fund, was an investor in an ice cream company, and the president of a cannabis company were sharing office space, and they needed help with their financial model. So I got an introduction, helped them raise money, built out a proper financial model for them, and ended up becoming their CFO, a vertically integrated cannabis company in Western Massachusetts. My involvement with Blinc, interestingly enough, started a little over 5 years ago. I was an investor in the seed round of Blinc's. Later, a partner in a small venture capital fund, which I remain a partner in, less active, obviously, these days, which is an investor in Blinc, and actually met my partner through Blinc because she was investing as well. And I've been at Blinc for just about 2 years, and I've been CFO for about 1.5 years.
Fantastic. Who would have known that that ice cream would turn into, now you're all over the cannabis industry here. You never know where the world's going to take you. Let's jump into a little bit about Blinc. So given that the Blinc Group is not plant touching, right? Talk us through how, we'll say, the roller coaster of the industry has impacted the company up to this point.
Sure, no question. And while we're not plant touching, obviously all of our customers are. So we are, while we don't have some of their challenges, we have a national bank. We actually have 2 bank accounts. We're getting insurance for us is a little easier, getting finance is a little easier. However, we're still considered a marijuana related business. So we still face, to a great extent, a lot of the same scrutiny that our customers do. We had a critical provider who, without notice, cut off our services because they decided that one of the banks that they worked with no longer wanted to do business with cannabis companies. So I think what we have to do, and which I had done in that case, is we had built 2 redundancies, right? So 2 other ways of accomplishing what this task, what this task was. But really, from a business standpoint, is, when there's availability of capital, when businesses are doing and growing well, that has a direct impact on our business. And, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit, 2022 is a very challenging year for the Blinc Group. And a lot of that was really driven by what was going on in the industry, which is while the heady days of 19 and 20 kind of came to an end, in 2021 and 2022, capital dried up. So while companies had working capital, they could buy plenty of hardware in advance of when they needed it. When money got tight, we absolutely saw that in our results for 2022. But the good news is we remain optimistic about the business. We have a basically tiny market share with plenty of opportunity for us to grow, and do believe that an industry which is larger than chocolate in the U.S. is going to continue to grow. It's one of my favorite, honestly, cannabis statistics. Is that
I gotta fact check that. Is that true?
I believe it is. I believe at that point we were counting, licit and illicit markets. And yeah, it's bigger than chocolate in the U.S. And we know for sure it's bigger than a lot of other things.
That makes sense. And that you mentioned market share. That's a good segue here because it is a competitive market, right? How are Blink's offerings different than its competitors, in the current form?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, to a large extent, our physical products are, relatively similar to others in the industry in that the bulk of our business is a combination of 510 thread carts, which is that cart that everybody knows that screws into a battery or you put a magnet on it and you drop it into a battery, or AIOs, which are all-in-ones, more colloquially known as disposables. I think, however, what makes us different is really the way we think about the business, which we really look at it, and it may be a little trite to say this, but very customer focused, which is what's important to our clients, but more importantly, what are their pain points? What are the things that make doing business in the cannabis space harder? And really, how can we address it? Here's just a few examples, three things that really come to mind, that we think about. One is the hardware itself, right? I don't know how many vapes you've consumed in your life, and you do not have to, disclose that here on this call. But I think we're all familiar, with the phenomenon that how many vape cartridges do you actually finish all the way through? So clogging and leaking is an issue within the industry. And a lot of it really starts with a mismatch between what your oil is that you're putting in the cartridge and the basic specifications of the cartridge itself. How big are the apertures? What are the wetted materials made of? What is the resistance of the cartridge? Our background, and to sort of think about our origins for a second, our founder and CEO came from the nicotine vaping world, still sits his chair as two international standard setting committees. So we really focus on our work upfront with our customers, which is getting their oil. We'll do rheology testing on it. We'll test the viscosity. We'll decide what we think is the best cartridge for them. And then we'll send them a series of cartridges and work with them as they go through the testing process. Because the number one way to avoid issues is to make sure that you get that match correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the core product, I think, and this is somewhat of a function of, my background and thinking about finance and business, as well as our COOs and CEOs, that it's what are the core problems that limit your business growth. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, is, companies being capital constrained and not necessarily having the expertise to manage their own supply chains. It is a complex supply chain. So let's start with capital. We introduced a new product at the very end of last year that we call Scale Now, Pay Later. And essentially what it is a strategic partnership with us and a finance company where our customers can get up to 5 months of financing for 7%. And what that really does for their business, in addition to eliminating the need for capital up front, is it allows them to buy our cartridges, or disposables, fill them, sell them, and then finish paying for it over the next 2 or 3 months. So basically what you create in that case is a positive working capital cycle. And obviously this is a time, especially last year and still difficult, where companies, don't have what most traditional companies have is a working, credit line, seasonal financing, because we all know with Chinese New Year coming up, you need to bring more inventory in because that shuts down for a couple of months. Those tools don't really, which are very traditional standard tools, don't exist. So we had to do that. The net result of it is, almost a quarter of our business this year has been done that way. So we know that it's either a material benefit to our customers or it's bringing business to us that we might not normally get. And it also is just a great door opener for us. And the second program that we think is really critical was introduced this year. It's called Vendor Managed Inventory. It's what I alluded to before, which is basically we take over our customer supply chain of their vape hardware. All they need to worry about is how many cartridges they want to use in the next month. We will sign an agreement with them. We'll do the same specifications of their hardware. We will produce it. We will bring it into our warehouse system here in the United States. And therefore, we will ship on a monthly basis, a twice a monthly basis, the number of carts that a customer needs. So again, if they need 20,000 cartridges a month or 30,000 cartridges in a month, we can manage that on the back end. And again, from a working capital standpoint, they don't have to buy 100 or 200,000 cartridges at a time. They give us a deposit, and then they can really sort of meter that, on a monthly basis. And what it just does is it takes a big headache away from them. They don't need to worry about the storage space. They don't need to plan 6, 8, 10 weeks out. We really take that over for them. And the reception so far to that product really has been terrific. Because look, cannabis is not an easy business, right? Between regulatory, between growing a live plant, between the processing. So if we can take a couple of headaches off of our clients' hands, at the same time making them stickier to us, it's a lot easier to just keep going back to the same source once you get into that. So there's certainly selfishness, involved in this process also. It just really allows us, again, not to be trite, but to really become partners of our customers, not just a supplier. And, the program so far working really well, and we're happy to continue to see them expand and always trying to figure out what's next.
No, I love that insight. I'm sure, folks tuning in a competitive market like this, really, really great insights. I think everyone knows enough about the industry, right? It hasn't been fantastic the last couple of years. So I always like to talk about some positives, right? And I know Blinc's business, you're not publicly traded, so all the information's not out there, but through the first 3 quarters of 23, the business has had a really impressive, turnaround compared to that first 3 quarters of 22, right?
Yeah.
Why is that, right? Let's get some positivity going here. Talk a little bit about how that's taking place from a business perspective.
Sure. Let me start with the headline and then let me backtrack. But yeah, through the first 3 quarters of 2023, we have positive EBITDA of $1.4 million, and that's versus a loss of $1.6 million for the first 9 months of 2022. But sort of what comprised it, what happened. And as I alluded to before, 2022 was a difficult year for us. Again, coming off the strength of 2019, 2020, 2021, our customers really, had to reel their spending in. But I also think that there were some, issues within Blinc that we needed to fix. So what did we do? We basically hired most of the new management team in 2022. A new COO, a new head of sales, with a different methodology in terms of how we, sell, and myself, as a new CFO. To give us a couple more statistics, revenues in 2023 versus 2022 through the first 9 months, revenues are up 45%, while we were able to cut our costs 21%. And that's a function of a couple things. Most notably, we were involved in a very large litigation last year started late 21, went through 22, resolved early in 23. That was incredibly expensive. It was an International Trade Commission case where the largest vape manufacturer basically tried to get 38 companies in the US to stop importing products. But really, beyond that, we cut costs. Our rent, for example, we had really nice offices in downtown Manhattan, and we're paying sort of $23,000 a month. That's now down to $9,000. We rationalized, our employees, no layoffs, but a couple of replacements, where we saw fit. But really, it's just paying attention to the dollars, plus a very material increase in our gross margins, to the tunes of over 1,000 basis points. And we've been able, and that's really we have a team in China, but it's really a function of working with multiple factories, being aggressive in terms of negotiating price. Some of the programs that we've been able to run with our customers, the VMI and the scale now, pay later, we've been able to get them sign larger orders up front, which allows us to go back to our factories and get better pricing. And while we've been able to grow our margins, we've cut about 25% out of our costs also over the last 12 months. That we, obviously 25% that we passed on to our customers. And again, as we talked about, a couple of these new programs have really helped us drive, our bookings and drive our revenues into 2023. But with sort of the, backdrop of, increased revenues, decreased costs, improved margins, we really have seen a fairly dramatic turnaround, which honestly I often forget about until I really take a look at the quarter end numbers sometimes.
That's great. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Increase revenues, become a little leaner on the expense side, improve operational efficiencies, right? Again, easier said than done, but hopefully we'll continue in 24 for the Blinc Group.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of that is we have a terrific team, including a team based in Shenzhen in China, which is we've got 8 people there, including a few engineers. We're on the floors of our factory. We do new product development there. It really makes a material difference where we can really be on the ground every day there.
Fantastic stuff. So I always end the interview this way. I'm not going to hold you to this, but give me a prediction. Now that we're at the end of 23, give me a prediction that you have for cannabis as we look to 2024, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, no, we're really close to 2024. I don't know that I have a specific prediction for 2024. I actually think that this industry probably spends too much of its time doing predictions, right? I think one of the things we've learned over the last 12 or 18 months as we've turned the business around is, let's deal with what we have in front of us. That doesn't mean we don't look at trends. One of the things we've certainly done with our business is dramatically increase our offerings on the AIO or disposable. That's where the market's going. That's what our producers want because they get to control the entire process. It's the oil, the cartridge, it's the temperature, it's how much the device draws at any one type or another. So think about a winemaker being able to grow the grapes. Obviously they do it themselves in their casks, then they bottle it, but then they get to control how you store it, and then they get to decide what glass you put it in. So again, we look forward to trends. Obviously, we're looking at what new market's going to be opening. But again, I'm happy to make predictions. I think vape will continue to grow will continue to grow its market share. And I think one of the products not related to our business that will probably grow quicker, again, starting from a low numbers, beverages. I think when the industry can figure out sort of a sessionable beverage, a la, beer, wine, or a cocktail, I think that's a product that I'm excited about. Logistics are obviously much more difficult than other industries, but I do think that is something that we're going to see, especially when we see the trend in, consumption lounges. Look, we're inherently social creatures. We want to meet for a beer. When you look at sort of the youngest generation that's of legal age, is they're giving up alcohol in exchange for cannabis. That'll continue, but I think like a 2 milligram, 3 milligram sessionable drink is something that I think we're going to see take a much larger market share in 24. So in addition to continued growth of vape, I would say beverages.
Beverage. Yeah. No, it's a great. I think those are all great points. We'll check back later in 24 to see how accurate you were. No.
Is there a contest? Like, do you take all the
yes, exactly. We'll pull the notes of everybody, and then you get an award at the end of it. So we'll follow back up on that. Well, Steve, really appreciate you joining us. As always, it's great chatting. Love your talking insights and hearing a little bit more about what's happening with the Blinc Group. So truly appreciate it.
Appreciate your time as well. And like I said up front, and will deny I've ever said this, we have really appreciated your guys' support, especially me through my transitions taking over CFO. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, we have another great episode planned for next month. So please stay tuned and join us on the next episode of Cultivating Business in December.